Today in our 2014 Chevrolet Malibu, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Blue Ox base plate kit with removable arms. So here's what our base plate looks like once we have it fully installed. Our base plate is going to be the attachment point where our tow bar is going to hook up to so we can safely and securely flat tow our Malibu down the road. What you're really going to like about the base plate is the fact that when we're not towing, we can pull on this tab right here, the arm will rotate, and then we can pull it out and it'll have a very inconspicuous look. Like most base plates, we're going to have our safety cable connection points right here next to the arms. And as you can see, we'll have plenty of room to get those hooks on or off and not have to worry about fighting the grill or any part of the car. Our base plate is going to come with a bracket to mount a breakaway switch, as well as these two prongs here that are going to come out in the center so we can mount any kind of electrical socket that we want. Our base plate is designed to work with most Blue Ox tow bars, as well as some Roadmaster tow bars with an adapter that is sold separately. Our base plate is custom designed for our Malibu, so we're not going to have to weld it all, but there is going to be some minor drilling, and we are going to have to remove the front fascia in order to get it installed. We're not going to have to cut the fascia itself. However, you can see we did have to trim out the lower grill area, but not anywhere that had any paint. So now that we've seen what our base plate looks like and gone over some of the features, let's show you how to get it installed. To begin our installation, we're going to open up the hood on our Malibu, and on each side of the latch mechanism, we're going to have several fasteners that we're going to have to remove. You're going to want to grab a T20 Torx bit and remove all the fasteners along the front edge. Next, we'll move to the wheel well, and we're going to have three fasteners that are holding the liner in place. So we're going to grab a T15 Torx bit and pull those three screws out. We'll have one towards the bottom, one that's going to be a little bit further up towards the center, and then one towards the top, but before we get to the fender. So once you have those three screws removed, you're going to peel back on the wheel well liner, and right where the fender meets the fascia here, we're going to have a 7mm head bolt that we'll need to pull out. So we can grab a 7mm socket and pull that out. So once you have those three screws removed, you're going to peel back on the wheel well liner, and right where the fender meets the fascia here, we're going to have a 7mm head bolt that we'll need to pull out. So we can grab a 7mm socket and pull that out. Once you have that one removed, we're going to repeat that process on the other side. On the underside, we're going to have two 7mm bolts on each side right next to this square hole. And if we come back on that panel, right by this air deflector, we're going to have three more on the back side that are holding it in place. Let's take a 7mm socket. We're going to pull all those out. If we follow that panel, we can see that it's going to meet the fascia at the bottom here. So we'll take a Phillips head bit or screwdriver. We're going to pull the screw out at the front. And we're going to have one more screw where it's attaching it to the wheel well liner. So we want to remove that one as well so we can have the fascia free from anything else. Finally, we'll remove the four push pins towards the back of our fascia on the bottom. This will be a little recessed area on the push pin itself. Take a flathead screwdriver. We're going to pop out the center section. That's going to relieve the tension off of the clip. And once you have the center section pulled out, we can come underneath the outer section and pull out the rest of the push pin. We'll do that for all four of these at the bottom. Now we're going to grab an extra set of hands so we can safely pull the fascia off. We're going to start at the corner where the fender meets the fascia, and we're going to pull out, releasing those clips, start working our way towards the center. And once it comes loose by the headlight, we can slowly pull it away and check for any kind of electronics that may be back here, like our fog lights or anything else. I'm going to squeeze in on that tab, and we can pull the connector off. Make sure to disconnect any electronics before you pull your fascia too far away, but we'll set it aside where it won't get damaged. We're going to need to remove our passenger side headlight. We're going to have a few screws holding it in place. We'll have one that's going to be towards the engine, towards the back. If we follow the headlight down, we'll have one that's going to be towards the center of the grille. Then on the bottom side, we'll have one that's going to be underneath the headlight. And then finally, right where the fender would meet the fascia, we'll have another one. We want to grab a 7mm socket and we can pull all those screws out. So I'm going to grab our headlight and we'll pull it loose. And you want to come to the back side and disconnect the wiring harness. There's going to be a small tab. We'll slide that back, push in. We'll slide that small red tab back, push in on the tab, and release the connector. Right underneath the headlight, we're going to have a push pin that's holding this baffle in place. So you have a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool, and we can pull that push pin out. It's going to work the same way. We'll pull the center section out, and then we'll pull the rest of the push pin out. Then if we move to the center, we're going to have two push pins, one at the opening of the baffle, and then one at the support that we'll have to remove as well. And these push pins are not going to have that center pin. You're just going to want to get underneath and pry them out. We'll grab the end of the baffle and pull it downward so we can get the whole thing and pull it out so we can set it aside. Where the bumper beam meets the frame, on each side we'll have two bolts that are holding it in place. So we can grab a 13mm socket and wrench, and we'll loosen it up. There are going to be nuts on the bottom here. So you can use the wrench to hold the nut, and we'll pull the bolts and nuts out on each side. With all those bolts removed, you want to make sure you pull the push pins that are attaching this plastic shroud to the bumper beam itself. Once everything's detached, we can pull the bumper beam off. Just be aware that it is going to be a really tight fit. So if it feels like it doesn't want to come off, double check that there's no other fasteners, even if they are just plastic fasteners. But you may want to get a pry bar and kind of push it away to get it started. On the driver's side, where our horn is going to be located, we're going to have the bracket that's holding it in place to the frame by this nut. So we'll grab a 13mm socket and an extension, and we're going to pull that nut out. And we're going to remove the horn. We're just going to push it aside so it's kind of out of the way for now. Now on the frame here, you see how it sticks out from the side? We're going to be making a few notches in the frame where I mark these lines at. And basically what we want to do is we want to cut a straight line till it gets to where it's going to be pretty close or not flush with the side of the frame here, and then we're going to bend the flap so that it sits nice and flush. Once you have those three relief cuts made into the side flange here, we can grab a pair of channel locks. We'll lock it on to that metal tab. And we're going to be bending it to where it's going to sit nice and flush against here. Now you're probably going to have to work at it a little bit, move the pliers, work it out a little more, and just keep going until you can get it to a spot to where maybe you can get a hammer in there and hit it so it's bent flush. So this should be the final product when you're done bending and cutting everything. You'll have those two bolts that are on the side of the frame right here. There's going to be that small tab coming out. You're going to want to cut that tab off and then bend the lower section to where it's going to be nice and even with the frame. You want to make sure you do that on both sides of the vehicle. Now, it's never a good idea to leave exposed metal on your vehicle, so I'm going to come back with some spray paint. I'm just going to spray everywhere that has any cuts or anywhere the paint has been damaged. We're going to grab an 18mm socket and we're going to pull both of those bolts out. So we're going to grab our support plate. And the way you're going to know you have the correct one for the side is we're on the passenger side now, and that long tab is going to be facing down. And if we look on the inside, it'll be thicker and have a section sticking out. You want that to be against the frame. So these top two holes towards the back are going to line up with the weld nuts where we just took those two bolts out of. And to secure our plate in place, we're going to take an M12 bolt. And for all of our hardware, you want to make sure you put a little bit of Loctite on there. And we'll follow it up with a lock washer and then a flat washer. Goes through the hole on our plate. We're going to get this loosely started, and then we'll put the other one in right below it. Once you have all the bolts in place, you're going to want to make sure you snug them up. So we'll come back with a 19mm socket and tighten up our bolts. With the plates snug down, we should have a total of 4 holes left over. We're going to be working with the top one that's closest to the front. We're going to want to grab a 3/8 drill. We're going to drill through the frame using that plate as a template. And with it drilled out, you want to grab one of your 3/8 bolts. Make sure that it can fit all the way through the bracket and the frame, and then we'll drill out the other side. Now with the next set of hands, we're going to lift our base plate into position. And you want it to go on the inside between the frame and that side bracket. And we're going to want to line up the holes with the hole we drilled in our bracket and the hole in the base plate. You're going to want to get a 3/8 bolt and a lock washer to go through the outer bracket, the base plate, and the hole we drilled earlier on each side. Then we'll take a handle nut. We're going to feed it inside the frame so we can meet up with the bolt going through. And there may be some tension on the bolt, so you may have to use a socket and a ratchet to get that bolt started. With both bolts tight on each side, we'll drill out the remaining 3 holes on each side of our base plate. Now we'll take another one of our 3/8 bolts and lock washers, and we're going to go through the hole we drilled and secure one of those nut plates. So make sure you get it at least started. I always like to leave them a little bit loose, that way I can move the handle out of the way to get the other ones in place. For the lower hole, you're going to want to grab the longer of the 3/8 bolts. It's going to go into the frame right here. And we're going to use this large hole as an access hole so we can feed our handle nut into the frame. You may have to bend it a few different directions to get it the way you want it to land, but it just takes a little bit of patience. Kind of helps if you can line everything up and make sure it at least catches on there hand tight. We'll come back with a 9/16 socket and snug up all of our 3/8 hardware. And we'll go and repeat that for the other side, but you want to leave the tails on the end of your handle nuts for now. We can grab our permanent safety cables, and each end's going to have a loop on it. We want to make sure we go around the frame and the base plate. So I'm going to go around the frame here and have it come back around that mount. And then I'm going to attach both ends to the attachment point that's on our base plate. Just feed our quick link onto the tab, and we can move our safety cable out of the way. We'll start threading it in. Make sure you get the other end on there. I just want to make sure that your safety cable isn't going to rub against anything. You may want to take some zip ties and we can tie up the excess so it won't be in the way and we don't have to worry about it rubbing. But with this side on, we'll go and repeat that for the other side as well. We're going to come back with the 19mm socket and torque the bolts. We're going to make sure to double check the instructions for the torque value because these bolts are going to be different than our 3/8. We're going to make sure you repeat that for any remaining hardware you have. For all the tails that are on our handle nuts, we can take a pair of pliers. And a trick to get them to break fairly easy is if we take them, you're going to want to grab them pretty hard with the pliers, and we're just going to bend it back and forth, and it should snap right off. So with our base plate torqued down and everything tight, we can put the horn back in place. So we can put our bumper beam back in place. And just remember, it is going to be a pretty tight fit, so you may have to give it a good push to really get it to go in. And with the bumper beam back in place, we'll put the plastic shroud and all those pieces back on, and we can start working on reassembling the vehicle. So we'll plug our headlight back in place. Whenever you plug it in, you just want to make sure that red tab is out. And whenever you do plug it in, you push it forward to lock it in place. Give it a quick tug, make sure it's locked in. Then we can put our headlight assembly back in and re-secure it with all the hardware. So with everything in place, we can get ready to put our fascia back on. Now we're going to go ahead and run our wiring because it's going to be a lot easier with the fascia off to do it than try to contend with everything and get our wires up front. Now keep in mind, before you put the fascia back on, you are probably going to have to trim out an area so where the arms and everything can come through. The easiest way to do it is just hold the fascia as close as possible, and that way you can mark out where you need to trim. So make sure you line everything up pretty close. And we can put all the fasteners back in the same way we removed them. We did, however, have to trim this lower grille section for all of the components and accessories to come out. That'll finish up your look at the Blue Ox base plate kit with removable arms on our 2014 Chevrolet Malibu.